Hey, yo, it's Guido coming at you with a Tactics Talk and a new series of Tactics Talk Map Room. We'll start with Abbey at the very top alphabetically. Now that 1.0 has dropped and has been out for a while, these maps have started to solidify. Not much has really changed other than a couple of them as we get to, such as Erlenberg, but we're talking Abbey today. And here's the things we're going to talk about for Map Room. We are going to look at deployment routes, typical class positions. We'll take a look at where early shots can be found. Early damage is best damage. We'll look at the meta and critical terrain on the map and have a discussion on high risk, high reward spots and class best spots, as well as some non-standard win options, things you can do on the maps that's non-standard but can cause a win if done right. We'll take a look at general battle flow, how the battle typically pans out on Abbey. We'll look at crossfire and flex opportunities in amongst the battle flow, and then late game considerations, break it down into two. Am I winning or am I losing? So those are the things we'll talk about. Let's get into it. Map Room and Abbey Tactics Talk. Here we go. Let's start with deployment routes on Abbey, and we'll start down here in the south. You see a spawn in the south here. Of course, the north spawns up in the north, so it's a north-south fight for the most part. For the south, the deployment routes are coming off of the cap. You can go around over to here on the east side, or you can come off cap and you have two routes to go over to the west side. The first one is around this way, and the second one is taking this ramp and coming up and around to this position right about here. There are other options to come off the front of the cap and go up if you're fast and try to get into the Abbey right here. There are also potential filters into the bottom of the little town right there. This is also a route up here through about the 6 line, but not really recommended. If you go here, you need to stay about here, maybe get into this spot here, but that can be quite dangerous as well. So those are the general deployment routes coming from the south spawn. For the north spawn, same thing applies. You can come off of the spawn and then come down here. We'll talk about shot opportunities. You're probably moving to about this position right here. You can come off to the west. You go up the ramp right here and work your way into a position about right here, or you can come off low around this area and you're either trying to get here or potentially push across. We'll talk about why you might not want to do that in that case. And the same thing down the south, we'll talk about that as well. You come off the front of the cap, you can come on up here into the Citadel or the Abbey, which is what the map is named for. Obviously there's going to be a battle right there if you do that. You can also come across here, just like here. I don't really recommend this position, or filter into the bottom town right there. So those are all of the basic and typical deployment routes. Let's move on to class positions within those deployment routes. Typical class positions. Where do the different classes typically go on this map? Let's talk heavies first. We'll move down the line from the south. Your heavies will be here, here, potentially on this corner, depending on what's going on. You can take heavies up to here. We'll talk about the 8 line as we go, but it's kind of a secondary theater. I don't really recommend heavies in the middle. However, I'll put an icon in this general area because depending on your class situation, or sorry, tier situation, bottom tier, it may be that you're more of a support heavy, but that is in general where you will find your heavies. The mediums, being faster, will get over to this position here. They can support over on the west side, especially if you're top tier. Again, thinking about tier considerations, and mediums are effective here, going into the Abbey and fighting for the Abbey, or at least denying it. We'll talk about that later, or over here into the lower town. As far as the scouts go, scouts again coming here, probably the most likely other than fast mediums to get up into the Abbey right there, filtering down into the bottom village or town right there as well. And over here, there's a position here with a bush, which can scout out about this position here, depending on your spotting range. 4 Tankers and a Dog has a great video on how to use this spot. This is a high risk, high reward. We'll talk about that just a little while later, but that is a potential position. Scouts can move into here, but that can be very dangerous, getting spotted by TDs sitting back here. We'll talk about that in just a minute as well, but that's probably a tertiary kind of idea. TDs, where do you find them? This is an okay spot early game because it can get shots right here down the middle. Well, don't want to do that. Potentially over here as well, but you're not having as good as shots into the city there. And the other spot is right here, using the spotting vision from this light and getting shots on the guys coming across this area right here. Where do you go from the north? Oh, artillery, I forgot you. Typically here, about here, sometimes in the back corner there, but this probably has the most limited shots. This position and this position are best because they can hit two of the most important areas. This little corner, taking on the red guys, and both of them can get along the 8 line, which is what this little area is usually called, the 8 line right here in shots. This one has a little bit more trouble dealing with this, other than some of the pushes down onto the very far west side. But that's a situational position. These two are probably the best. From the north, it's pretty much a mirror image really on this map. You're going to have heavies here, hold down potentially on this corner and peeking around this corner, maybe back here situationally. There are some dead tanks sitting here that provide some cover. The other place you may find heavies is moving up into this position right here. For the mediums, again, mirror image, you'll find them here, filtering into the city, potentially supporting your heavies over here and hanging out back here, or pushing with the heavy tank coming into this direction. For the lights, countering your light potentially in this area. There is a bush back here doing the same thing that I talked about, getting shots on your team, or the green team, I guess, moving across right there. So that is also a possibility with the light tanks. And then moving and filtering around into the lower village and pushing up into and fighting for, with the other lights and mediums, the Abbey area right there. Do not really recommend light tanks over here. They're not very useful. For the TDs, this is a position that can get shots, although it's not quite as nice as the south position. Getting shots on guys trying to get up into the Abbey. Like I said before, if you're fast TD and can get in position, you can get some early damage there, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Again, the corollary to the south, a TD position right there to take shots, early shots onto guys crossing in this area down here. And then the usual camping back up on the cap late game potentially to try to stop a push into your cap. So there you go on typical class positions from the north and the south. I always try to forget artillery. Up here, why was it not working? Oh, because it's not artillery. That's why. Dopey right here, maybe over here, but it's a little more limited on the north side. You'll mostly find the artillery back in this corner. This one's not as useful. Same discussion for putting one over here. It's not an ideal spot. Both sides can put them on the 8 line here. I don't really recommend that, because if your 8 line gets pushed, then your SPG has a hard time getting around this corner and getting away. So really here and probably on this corner, or maybe over here in the south, are the best positions for it. Those are the typical class positions. Let's talk about early shots next. Early shots, early damage, best damage. Where are the places you can get early shots? Let's take a look at from the south first. Getting to this position right here and taking shots on somebody coming from the north up onto the road. If you're fast enough and good depression, you can get early shots as they attempt to get up into the Abbey right there. The other position for relatively early shots is putting a scout or somebody with a lot of vision here and taking shots across here as they cross or try to get up to this area here and cover themselves up with this terrain. So 2 opportunities for early shots. Sometimes there's opportunities for early shots here if the enemy is dopey and pushes down in here real fast, but that's kind of a tertiary place. You can also sometimes find early shots in the same vein down in this lower area, somebody being a little bit crazy and pushing hard into this lower area and you sitting on the back or behind these buildings and hitting them with early shots. The only real early shot opportunity up here is, actually there's 2. One is from here and here, which is kind of the same thing. You're taking shots at somebody who pokes around this corner. The other one is on this corner, you're taking shots on somebody who is crossing over here or who just drives right up and straight into you from that direction. We'll talk about some high risk, high reward spots up in here that will provide potentially some early shots, but those are the earliest ones that you're going to see. As far as artillery goes, if you have a fast artillery and you can position right here, you can potentially hit fast reloading. I mean, you can potentially hit the guys as they come up the road. Also, if you're set up, you can pre-aim in this area right here, and you can lob shots on the spots as they come around the corner right there. This one is less effective for artillery, although it will take a little while longer for them to get set up. You can find groups of tanks sitting up here, clumping up and letting you hit more than one group of guys at once. So those are the early shots from the south. Let's talk about the north. early shots from the north are pretty much a mirror image, starting over in the west, this position, and getting shots across down to here on the guys that are trying to cross. As long as you got the vision to do so, that happens pretty quickly. Again, from the north, TD position or setting up right here, and you're looking for the guys attempting to get up into the Abbey and get shots. Also, this position here, somebody is foolish and sort of drones around in the middle there being silly. You might get some shots if you were there the fustest with the mostest and ready to go. Again, up here, this corner, potentially this corner, and getting here. And the early shots on the west side is predicated on you having a faster tank than them, and you do have to watch and look at the setup, because if you get here second, you may actually get the early shot on you as you're pulling forward, but the shot is looking down here as guys try to come up and set up in a position there. So if you're there first, you may get the shot, and then you can back down, hold down. This little corner here can be used as well. Same thing here, taking shots down this way as they attempt to set up in these positions right here. The artillery is similar to the south. You are looking to take shots potentially on these guys as they get spotted, potentially on these guys as they try to push up into the Abbey. You've got to set up here to do that. You can set up pretty much anywhere to hit these guys. You can see that with the angle, you can have your artillery here, you could have them over here, you could even actually have them over here for the most part to get shots on that. The best place to get shots on these guys showing up with artillery, if you can reload fast enough, is to be over in this area right here, because those shots just go nicely into that little zone, and they will clump tanks up there just like your team will clump up tanks over here, and you can put a bunch of damage on them as they're looking, and those are pretty much the early shots. I talked about it earlier. There can be some early shots right in here, but again, I don't really recommend going in there. And the only way to come in here and spot guys camping is to overextend and get quite a ways in here, and there's not a lot of cover. There is some bushes and some other things here, but you are more likely to be spotted here than the guys are going to be spotted by you on the north. So those are pretty much the early shot capabilities from the north spawn. Next thing we'll talk about are the meta and critical terrain considerations, and they're basically the same from both sides on this map. In my opinion, the critical terrain is right here. The west side is the critical fight. The east side is a secondary fight. We'll talk about that under non-standard ways to win this map. The center is important. The center is important. So how this battle over in the west goes is typically how this fight goes, because once you win this, you can either flex back to your cap, depending on which side you're on, or you can push into the other guy's cap, and you have these overwatch positions where you can then get shots on their campers on the cap. This is a very strong position to win, and it is basically, in my opinion, the meta critical terrain. The Abbey needs to be watched and controlled, if not won. If you can win it, that's pretty good. Unfortunately, what it doesn't do is it does not provide a whole lot of shots. There are some. You can take shots through here onto the north cap, but it's fairly wide open. There's a ledge here, which is probably better for the north spawn as far as having shots down on the south spawn, because there's a little more cover and you're kind of hold down. This is basically wide open with some pillars in front of you. You can do some side scraping and other things, but you can see that this position gets a little bit closer to the cap, and there's a little bit better cover right there. You really have to get up and out in the open here to really spy the north cap. So the Abbey is more effectively used as far as looking at the cap by the north spawn if they win it. The other thing the Abbey does is provides crossfire into areas like this right here. So if this fight gets stagnated, you got guys kind of there, or they're slowly pushing forward and you own the Abbey, doesn't matter which side you're talking about. If the other team owns the Abbey, they have shots into your side if you're pushing. So if you're going to say the red team has the Abbey and you're pushing from the south, you've got to get past these open areas pretty quickly, push into them and take these guys out. Otherwise, they're going to have shots all day into your side. There's two pieces of rock right here, which will block some of it, but not all of it. And based on the way the game's played, lots of back and forth and moving around, eventually you're going to poke some of your tank out and they're going to start shooting you. Obviously, they can be spotted from there. So if you've got guys watching them, you can punish them for doing so. But that is one of the big crossfire opportunities as far as the meta or critical terrain goes. Those are the things that can go on right there. All right, let's move on. High risk, high reward, and best class spots. Interesting on this, there are no real amazing high risk, high reward spots. There is this that I talked about, again, reference 4 Tankers and a Dog's video on that. That can be highly effective on controlling the north or the south push. but it is a place where you can get trapped and it's hard to get off, especially if they start filtering down, depending on which side you spawned on. There is a spot here and a spot here and a spot here that you can tuck a medium or even a fast heavy into early, and it doesn't matter which spawn you're talking about. Unfortunately, that spot can be hit from the Abbey. Artillery can lob into those spots and hurt you. You can also be shot, depending on which side you're talking about, from the TD spots into those spots. So while it's nice to tuck in there and be able to kind of either shoot guys who are pushing from the north or the south into the side, it is fairly exposed to a lot of different directions. So you've got to kind of pay attention to how many TDs, where those TDs are, how many artillery. Again, artillery from here can fire over into there as well. It just depends on which side you're spawning from. So it is a high risk, high reward spot. The south one is useful for the south team to take shots at guys who are fighting for the Abbey. The north one is not nearly as useful for the north team to do so because it's just a longer drive to get in there and it's harder to use and it's a little bit more exposed to crossfire than this one is right here. So it's just one of the vagaries of the map right there. So those are really the high risk, high rewards. I would include this as high risk, high reward as well. The Abbey is extremely difficult to use. If you take it easily and don't lose a bunch of hit points, you can control a lot of the middle part of the fight, but I've talked about a little bit about the crossfire situations and how it can be difficult. I have yet to touch on taking shots from the Abbey down onto the 8 line, and it is possible from this position here to get shots down onto the Abbey, but it is not very easy, and they do have shots back on you. It is slightly hold down. There's a little tiny wall right there which will help you. If your tank is low slung, that will help you out as well. There are opportunities to fight in this area here. This is a bit of a high risk, high reward area also, but it's more of a late game position to gain kind of map control in there. If you come from the north or south spawn and jump up into there, you're risking being pushed by the other team, and once you get trapped there between, say, somebody in the Abbey, guys pushing you along the lower road, and then depending on which spawn we're talking about, the south spawn TD snipers or north spawn TD snipers, it is very difficult to bail out of this spot right here early game when there's that many guns in the game there. So that is pretty much the high risk, high reward spots on this map. Class best spots are pretty much not a surprise. For the south, heavies here or here fighting over on this meta position. For the mediums, fighting over here, at least watching the 8 line, controlling the middle, and I'm going to add helping the heavies right there. For the lights, initially taking a look at the 8 line, making sure there's not some massive push coming in, controlling the middle right there are the class best spots, and we're talking about early or getting up into the Abbey here. For the TDs, early game, dealing with anyone who might be coming up the middle, coming over here and getting shots on guys pushing down, and depending on your TD, late game pushing up into this area right here. And then artillery probably back in this corner for the red team. Artillery back here. Heavies facing their heavies down in this area here. Mediums, again, pushing up into here and controlling the 8 line. Dealing with anybody in the middle, maybe filtering into the bottom. And for their light tanks, getting up here into the Abbey, or helping over here in the lower area. And for the TDs, early shots potentially here, and then sitting back here with their scouts, which I missed that guy, getting shots on the guys coming down from the south or moving up from the south. And that's pretty much the best class spots on this. Let's talk about some non-standard win possibilities on this map. Non-standard win possibilities, I talked about the west side being the meta or the critical terrain. There is a way, another 2 ways to do it. The first one is to come down, completely roll up the 8 line and push into their cap, or potentially flex back or come up over the middle if you're really winning, and you can go both ways from the middle here. And we'll just talk about north and south flow as the same thing. It's a mirror image of each other. You don't really win by pushing the middle, winning the middle, and then pushing into their cap. At least not early game. There's just too many guns left, and there are too many good shots coming from all these different sniper positions if you try to push straight across the middle. So even if you win the middle, don't go pushing in early game with lots of guns left. Some of these guys will turn around. They've got all kinds of sniper spots. You're just really out in the open, plus you've got the TD sitting back here, which is not really a great idea right there. So the only non-standard way is to do a Zerg rush down the 8 line, and that's not really recommended. Why? Because, as I clear all this out, Once you do get up around here and try to push on, the same thing applies. They can turn back around, get up onto the sniper position right there. Any TDs that were hanging out are going to come back here, go hold down because that's a lower area right there. If the enemy team won the middle, then they've got control of that, and they've got shots across from the Abbey onto you there as well. So pushing in with a lot of guns late game is not the way to go. If you Zerg rush down here and win, and you also happen to be winning on the west side, then by all means push in and challenge them. But if you simply Zerg rush and win, but there's still a big brawl going on there, it's a long drive, but your best bet's probably coming back all the way around to help these guys, or at least get back up into these positions if your west side has lost, and defend the cap. You've also got to pay attention to who owns the middle. You have to be careful about crossing all this area if they're all over the middle in there as well. So the best non-standard win is the Zerg rush, not recommended. Again, critical terrain, win the west, and then move either to the north or the south, depending on which way you're going or whether or not your cap is threatened. All right, we've talked a bit about the battle flow, but let's just go over it one more time, and we'll talk about it together from both spawns. The critical terrain is over here on the west. Once it's won, you either push into their cap or go back to your cap, and that arrow works for both sides. If your cap is in danger, go back. If you're winning on all sides, push towards their cap and start working on their campers. If somebody other than you owns the middle, go back. You probably can't push onto their cap because they're going to go ahead and wreck you as you try to cross these open areas, which both sides have right there. If the battle happens to have been mostly over on the east side, the same thing applies. If your cap is threatened, go back. If you have won everywhere else, push onto their cap. And again, pay attention to who owns the middle, because that's going to make either this position or this position dangerous to get to. This is an option late game for spotting and map control to see what's going on, because you can then get shots off into the open caps, although there is some cover along there as well. Again, whether this is useful or not to you highly depends on whether you still own the middle right there. This is a pretty standard flow for most maps as far as the battle flow goes. Let's take a quick look at crossfire and flex opportunities. This map has a lot of crossfire opportunities, but they're all kind of fleeting and very difficult to use. So I'm going to show you some of the positions where you can get the crossfire opportunities, and I've talked about it, a few of them already. There are some right here in these three little nooks. Where can they go? They can fire into the town. Guess what? The town can fire back from all kinds of places in between some of these buildings and take shots back. So there's quite a bit of crossfire going on there. If you're in the Abbey, you have shots to the north here and to the south from this position, and then this little nook right here has shots like I talked about down onto the 8 line for crossfire. Guess what? Return fire then can come up from all these areas right here into the Abbey, although I would say the Abbey has a slight advantage. Probably gets spotted a little easier, but he's hold down and a lot more covered right there. If you're going to get shot, if you're being shot from the Abbey, you need to tuck up against the edge right there, or potentially go back around the corners to get away from him. It's easier from the south side to get away from him. If you're on the north side, or if you're a south spawner and you're pushing north, there's a long time right here where you're actually able to be shot in the back from the Abbey, and that there's much less opportunity in the south for that to happen. Those are most of the crossfire opportunities on this map. This fight is pretty well self-contained unless you allow shots to come through those little holes right there. Again, this fight's relatively self-contained, except for this area right here can be shot quite a bit from the Abbey. The sniper positions on the cap are more late game situations or very early game shots on this one ramp right here. It takes a while for the fight then to filter in towards the cap. So most people who sit on the cap are going to take themselves out of at least a third to a half of the game, unless the enemy team either pushes in hard in a raffle stomp, in which case you're probably in trouble, or it's a close late game and some of the late stragglers try to get in there. Which is one of the reasons why on most maps, and this one in particular, I do not recommend camping on the cap. You're just expecting the enemy to come in there. The last one I'll talk about after I get rid of all these little things by clickety-clicking is there are some crossfire opportunities late game from here, shooting up onto the cap and up onto the north cap. It's a good map control area late game, as is this area right here. And of course, you've got the sniper hills on both sides here that have some shots, crossfire shots into several different positions down below. So those are some of the late game things you can talk about, and we'll talk about those in a little bit more detail here in just a moment. Let's talk some flex opportunities. Let's say you're over here on the west and you need to get somewhere. The question is, how do I get there the fastest and the best? You can actually drive down off of some of these areas right here and go through this water, but it is easy to drown in this water or get stuck or get turtled or whatever, but there is an opportunity to move that way. You cannot move from below to the top. That's not going to happen. Otherwise, you're taking the standard routes. You're coming around here, coming off the ramp, or you're coming around here and coming off this ramp. So if you've won this area, you're moving up into the sniper spot or this sniper spot, or you may come all the way around the bottom, which is not quite as good because when you cross this open area right here, depending on who has the middle, there can be shots on you as you're attempting to cross right there. So the flex opportunities from the west are highly dependent on how much control the enemy has of the middle of the map. Otherwise, you may be stuck up here on these sniper spots, relying on spotting and getting shots down onto the cap. And there are a couple spots near the caps where they can put a rock between themselves and the cap, and it's difficult to spot those guys. From the middle, there's quite a few capabilities to flex and move around. Like I said, you cannot go straight from the middle up to the west side, though. You do have to take this circuitous kind of long route out around here, and again, that puts you out into this open spot in both cases. There are some ways to kind of sneak around through some of these buildings and stuff and come out and come around this way. That's an opportunity as well. If you're on the east side, the same thing applies. It is possible to get up in here and across, but once you get up here, you're only going to drive out into the open, and a lot of that's going to depend on who controls the middle and whether you can afford to cross that great big open area. Otherwise, if you've pushed all the way to here or here from the other side and you decide I got to go back to cap, well, you're taking the long drive, either this direction or the long drive this direction, to flex across this map. So the map is not that easy to move from east to west, and it is typically done in the back end of the map if you got to do so. And if you're slow, it can be very painful to get that done. So your early decision on this map, other than fast tanks fighting in the middle, you're probably going to fight most of the battle either on the east or west, depending on which one you decide to go to first. So think about that when you deploy. It's important. You're just not going to have a lot of flex opportunities, and I kind of pointed out a few of them right there. Let's talk some late game considerations here. I've touched on them several times. The things you need to watch out late game are who owns the middle, once again, beating that dead horse. Who won the east, and are there tanks hanging out here, or are they pushing in this way or this way? And who won the west? Do I have snipers up on this spot, or do I have snipers up on that spot? And that's really going to inform what you can do and how you're going to flex. So let's break it down to, hey, I'm winning, and hey, I'm losing. We'll start with winning. If I'm winning everywhere, say I'm in south spawn and we've won over in the east and the middle's handled, then you can come off the ramp and you can push up here. You can put guys in the sniper spot. You can even come down low, push up, start spotting the campers that are going to be here and start taking shots. Where can you expect the red guys to be? They'll either be hanging out in the bushes. There are some places here behind some buildings and things you can be in, maybe in this little area right here, or they'll go hold down on that position as you try to push in and shoot across the cap at you right there. And that's a way winning situation where you've won everywhere. What if I'm losing? If I'm losing, then I've won on the west side, but I'm losing everywhere else. We'll go back. I don't want the red. I want green. Go back to your sniper position up here and cover the cap. Same thing applies from the north cap. Go back to your sniper position here and cover your cap. If I'm on the east side and I'm winning and I've won over in the west, the same thing applies. I can push in to the south right here, the north, push into the south. And if I'm getting a push from both directions, then these guys are doomed. Same thing applies up north. If I'm pushing in from here and I'm pushing in from here, two directions, these guys are doomed. And it almost doesn't matter whether they have the middle or not right there. You're getting pushed from two different directions. That's the way winning situation right there. Let's go on to losing. I'm losing from the east. I get to the east, I win, but I'm losing everywhere else. I've got to go back. Head back to the south, head back to the north. The similar considerations, though, because in both cases the enemy can go hold down at this position here. They can be sitting up on the sniper position here as well, so I've got to be careful of that as I'm coming back to defend my cap from both sides. That's where I'm going to find the enemy. And oh, by the way, are they up here occupying this position and taking shots on me as I try to cross this open area, or as I try to push back onto my own cap and attempt to stop them from coming at it? This middle position here, again, like I've talked about before, is usable, and in a losing situation, this is not a bad spot for some map control, If I'm trying to come back to my north cap here, I was a north spawn, and I've got guys sniping in here, I can position people in this area here, and I might get some shots, especially on dudes hanging out there. Not really going to have much on guys in here. But the other thing I can use this position for, depending on how many guns are in the game, is to sneak back around behind, getting up here and get into the Abbey and take these guys out. And from the other spawn, same thing, coming around this way, coming up into the Abbey and taking those guys out. So that's one of those flexibility or areas of the map where I can actually change my situation from the east flank to the middle flank, and there's just not very many of those on this map. You got to kind of go all the way around on most of the map, and again, you've got these spots here as well, which can help you out with that. And that's kind of the losing discussion there. All right, guys, that's it for Abbey Map Room. Hopefully that helped you out understanding how that map is played just a little bit right there. That was the first one. They'll get better as we go. I've already got a couple ideas on how I want to change things. Let me know down in the comments below on what you thought, what things you might want to have added, what did I not talk about that needed to be talked about, and we'll improve this as we go. But there you go, Map Room for Abbey. Good luck out there.